Let's stop it right there. Ned Stark dies in episode 9 of Game of Thrones, but let's trace backwards for a moment, because his death didn't come from nowhere. Ned dies because he confessed to treason he didn't commit, because Cersei offered him a deal. He dies because Joffrey is unpredictable, because he was raised inside a court built entirely on performance and fear. That court exists because the Targaryens were overthrown in a rebellion Robert Baratheon led, partly out of general political grievance, partly out of personal rage over Lyanna Stark. And the list goes on. By the time the sword falls, you are not watching one man's execution. You are watching the terminus of 100 decisions made by dozens of people over decades. Most of them are dead, and none of them intended this specific outcome. That feeling, when you suddenly see all these threads and realize they were always connected, is what I want to talk about today, because it's one of the most powerful things a story can do, and it requires something most stories aren't built for. The lone hero is one of the oldest shapes in storytelling. One person, exceptional in some way, facing impossible odds, winning or failing nobly through the force of their individual will and moral conviction. It works because it makes a promise that individual virtue matters, that one person in the right moment can change things. I'm not here to argue against this. I've talked elsewhere on this channel about how the small, morally clear hero can feel almost radical right now, but there is a ceiling to what the lone hero can show you. One consciousness can only be in one place, can only hold one set of values, can only understand the world from one position. And some stories, some worlds, are too big, too interconnected, too tangled for one position to contain. For those stories, you need something else. When most people say ensemble cast, they mean something like this. Multiple leads, roughly equal weight, 6 people and their apartments and their relationships and their very relatable problems. But it's not what I'm talking about. Friends is still fundamentally about people. Remove New York City, transplant the whole thing to any other city, any other decade, and the story still kinda works. What I'm calling epic ensemble, and honestly, I'm not fully happy with that term, so if you have a better one, please leave it in the comments. It's a different thing. Stories where every significant character exists not just as a person, but as a perspective on a world. And the cast is deliberately constructed to map a system, where you couldn't remove the setting and keep the story, because the setting isn't backdrop. Pull it away and the characters collapse. I'm talking Game of Thrones, Arcane, Attack on Titan in its later seasons. They are stories about worlds told through people. The Iliad is technically named after Achilles. His rage is the engine of the whole poem, but Homer keeps pulling the camera back. We spend time inside the Trojan camp. We see gods manipulating both sides like chess pieces. And by the end, you understand that no one in the story is simply right. The Mahabharata is even more sprawling. Hundreds of characters, multiple generations, an entire civilization's moral argument embedded in the architecture of one conflict. Those stories are ancient, which means the lone hero, the singular protagonist whose journey carries the whole weight of a narrative, might actually be the newer invention, the one that's easiest to market, easiest to put on a poster. Epic ensemble might be the older form, and it definitely isn't dead. For decades, TV drama scripts have been structured around what writers call the A, B, C, and sometimes D storyline, a main plot and subplots running simultaneously. What shifted in the streaming era is how seriously the structure is being taken. Platforms have learned through data that viewers who latch onto multiple threads are far less likely to drop off. They stick around. As a result, the writers are often expected to arrive with several fully developed storylines when pitching a show. In a way, the demand started with the audience. But why?
It's about the city that we made The Wire. The city, to me, is basically the only possible vehicle that we have to measure human achievement at this point and to pursue real human achievement, or I should say the paramount human achievement, which is how do we all live together? And how do we get a society that from one day to the next is actually progressing?
What David Simon is describing is an ambition that the lone hero story structurally cannot fulfill. You can't make an argument about institutions through one person's experience of them. One person can be affected by an institution. One person can fight one. But to show how an institution actually works, its internal logic, its self-perpetuating failures, the way it shapes everyone inside it, including the people trying to change it. For that, you need multiple perspectives from inside and outside the machine. This is what Epic Ensemble can explore that the lone hero cannot: collective morality. Questions like, how do societies make choices? How does an ideology spread through population and become a reality that shapes people who never consciously chose it? Arcane is almost entirely about this. There is no clear villain running the conflict between Piltover and Zone. The engine is inequality itself. The way wealth concentrates, the way good intentions calcify into institutions that serve the powerful, the way people on opposite sides of a wall gradually stop being able to imagine each other's lives. No single character caused this, no single character can fix this. This story needs the whole world to contain the argument. Succession asks the same question at a smaller, more claustrophobic scale. What does inherited power do to the people raised inside it? You need all 4 Roy children to answer that. Each of them is a different experiment run on the same raw material, and together they form a portrait that no single one of them could produce alone. I'm attempting to grow tea plants with this little kid. I've never planted anything in my life, so their survival is questionable. We'll see how it goes. Stay tuned. So, how does Epic Ensemble actually work when it works? The best epic ensembles operate on multiple levels of conflict simultaneously, and the real craft is in how those levels feed into each other. Arcane is the cleanest illustration of this I've seen in years. We start with personal conflicts, like Jinx's terror of abandonment, Victor's hunger to transcend his body's limitations, Jace's idealism curdling under the pressure of power he wasn't built to hold. Then we have the interpersonal level. Wine, Jinx, and the wound neither of them can close. Every scene between them carries love and guilt and rage braided so tightly you can't separate them. And that wound doesn't stay contained between 2 people. It detonates outward. It pulls in other characters. And now, zooming out a bit, we see group conflicts. Clashes between factions or communities that stand for opposing values, beliefs, or ways of life. And finally, we've got the global conflicts, the stakes that impact everyone in the world. The threat they pose transcends politics, making every character and every group face a choice: set aside personal grievances or face a much larger, extinction-level problem. So you can trace a single threat from a childhood trauma to a civilization-scale catastrophe. Beyond stone plotting, it makes a claim about how the real world works, that the personal and the political are never truly separate. Take a moment to look at the visuals of Piltover and Zone. Piltover's gleaming colors and gold accents radiate wealth and order, while Zone's palette executes chaos, struggle, and defiance. Without reading a single subtitle, you instinctively know where you are, just by the way the screen feels. The characters live in backgrounds so distinct they might as well be different worlds, not only in terms of climate or geography, but in the distinct rules, customs, and values. What feels deeply significant in one setting can seem trivial or even absurd in another. In Piltover, the problems are all about political intrigue and power struggles among its elite houses. We meet Caitlin as a defiant princess, a bird trapped in a golden cage. Her immediate struggle is against the expectations of her influential family. She longs to carve her own path, but she always has the option of retreating to her prince's bedroom, safe under her family's protection. Now contrast that with the children of Zon, orphans who must resort to theft and violence just to survive. Their challenges aren't about defined privilege, but escaping poverty, death, and constant danger. As viewers, we believe in both worlds because the problem each culture faces and the way characters respond feel grounded and consistent within their settings. And now that we've established these worlds, we've unlocked some powerful storytelling tools. One of the most impactful being the boundary crossing. When characters step into a world utterly unlike their own, what happens next? Well, in Game of Thrones, honesty and honor might serve you well. In Winterfell. But in King's Landing, it's a fatal flaw. In the capital's labyrinth of politics and intrigue, such straightforwardness can make you a target. It can make you lose your head. Or it can change you. Pouty grows up in a close-knit, family-focused environment, but cheers trust into a world driven by ambition and rebellion. Would she have become Jinx if she hadn't been severed from her family? This isn't even an abstract what-if. Arcane gives us the answer in its final act. Powder didn't have to become Jinx, but in the reality she faced, she did. When Caitlyn crosses into Zone, something irreversible happens to her. You can't unsee a community your city rendered invisible. The show doesn't resolve it cleanly. She carries the discomfort back with her, and it changes what she's able to want. Characters who cross boundaries don't just change themselves, they can change the world they enter and live. Look at how Piltover evolved from the beginning of the series to the end of Season 2. Jace's talent, ambition, and vision for progress turn it into a center of dread and innovation. But progress doesn't fix everything. The people in Piltover's upper circles keep ignoring the struggles of those in the Undercity, and that blind spot creates a powder keg of conflict. By the end of Season 2, Piltover is forced to confront its corruption and inequality. The events that unfold reshape the city, giving it a new identity. A large cast of characters is basically a toolbox, but it needs to be used with purpose and intention. Simply having a lot of characters doesn't automatically make a story deep or complex. What does is using them to reflect and explore overarching themes, giving the audience a chance to see those themes from multiple angles. In Arcane, Jinx's arc is about the ache of not belonging, but this theme isn't exclusive to her. It echoes across many other characters. Silco spends his life fighting for power and respect, but in the end his bond with Jinx outweighs his ambition. Victor's journey also revolves around this theme. As a Zonaite and a man with a disability, he finds himself an outsider in Piltover's academic circles. That constant sense of being out of place drives him to increasingly desperate decisions, leading him to sacrifice his friendships and eventually his very sense of self. Another theme that flows through Arcane is the price of progress. Jace, Victor, Mel, Heimerdinger, Echo each bring a different perspective on what progress means and how it should be achieved. To draw out all these contrasts and parallels between characters, the writers of Arcane employ a variety of techniques. For example, sometimes the characters are crafted as foils to each other. A lone hero story can have foils, a character or characters who contrast with the protagonist. But Epic Ensemble can build an entire architecture of foils. Victor's choices affect Jace's choices, affect Mel's choices, affect the Council's choices, affect Zone's reality. The foil architecture generates causality, and characters refracting each other is how the domino effect gets built. Let's go back to where we started. We traced Ned's death backwards, through Joffrey's upbringing, Lyanna's story, the Targaryen fall, and I said, by the time the sword falls, you are watching the terminus of 100 decisions made by dozens of people who never intended this outcome. The historian Barbara Tuchman called this the March of Folly, the way catastrophes are produced by the accumulated weight of ordinary decisions made by ordinary people inside systems that reward certain choices and punish others. She was writing about real wars and real empires, but the pattern is the same. That feeling of seeing all the threats and realizing they were always connected only works if you've been inside all those others' consciousnesses first. If you've only followed Ned, his death might be a shock, a plot twist. But if you followed Cersei, you understand her fear. If you followed Robert, you understand his grief and what it did to his judgment. If you've spent enough time in the court's logic, you understand how a place like King's Landing produces a person like Joffrey. And then, Ned's death isn't really a twist. It's kind of inevitable. It's the only place all those threats could have led. One protagonist can't generate that. That feeling requires a world. This is also, I think, why these stories feel so true right now, in a way that lone hero stories sometimes don't. We live in a world of domino effects. Real events don't have protagonists. A financial crisis, a war, a pandemic, you can't understand any of them through one person's experience of them. You need the whole system. You need the court, the council, the undercity, and the prison cell simultaneously. Epic ensemble storytelling is the form that most honestly reflects how the world actually works. Many attempts at this fail. It's worth being honest. The most common failure is what I'd call the cast list problem. A story has many characters, but those characters aren't doing different thematic work, they're just doing different plot work. They are obstacles or allies, but you could shuffle them and the story would be essentially the same. Game of Thrones in its final seasons is the most painful example because we'd seen how good it could be. The domino effect broke, and instead the characters became chess pieces. And we are left with something that looks like epic ensemble, but functions like a very expensive plot delivery mechanism. The second failure is unequal investment. You have 2 or 3 fully realized characters and 6 pieces of furniture. Arcane Season 2 has this problem. Characters who exist without the interiority that would make their choices matter. Obviously, not every character needs equal screen time, but each one should matter. Their actions and choices should resonate throughout the story, shaping its direction in some way. And the third failure is no shared question. The characters are just a lot of people. Characters should feel interconnected. Whether through shared themes, events, or parallels, their stories should contribute to the larger picture. How do their desires clash or align? How might they influence their settings, and in turn, how will these settings change them? We live in a very complex moment. Every story has 17 angles. The institutions we are meant to trust fail through thousands of small decisions made by ordinary people inside systems that reward those choices. We've seen it unfold in real time often enough to feel it in our bones. And I think we turn to these epic ensemble stories because they're the only ones honest enough to reflect that. Epic ensemble skips the lone hero, the savior. Here's the system, here are the people inside it, here are the choices they made and why given everything those choices made kind of sense. And here's what happened. It's clarifying, and clarity even about a broken system is a form of power. It's also, and I think this matters, a form of connection. These stories give us the experience of a world where everything is linked, where nothing happens in isolation, where you are not alone in a meaningless void, but part of something that extends far beyond you. We might be more hungry for that feeling than we realize. So, that's it. There are 2 more parts to this trilogy. The next essay is going to look at something I've been noticing everywhere lately, in horror, in fantasy, in very different kinds of stories, that I think is the dark mirror of everything we talked about today. Everything that Epic Ensemble celebrates, like the web of connections, the collective, the world made visible through many perspectives. This next thing takes that same hunger and twists it into something stranger. I'm excited about that one, and a little unsettled by it, which is usually a good sign. If you want to be here for it, subscribe. See you in the next one.